Welcome to Something to Talk About from the Bainbridge Island Senior Community Center. We get together regularly about this time, 1:30 in the afternoon, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, except on holidays or when we don't have something to talk about. But today we definitely do. State Representative Greg Nance is here, and we're going to be talking about all the work that he has done and the changes that have been going on in our Washington State ferry system and how we're doing on the project of fixing our ferries. I always like to start these programs by acknowledging that we are meeting on the ancestral homelands of the Puget Sound Coast Salish people, the Suquamish people, the people of the clear salt water, who have lived here since time immemorial. We honor them and we continue to learn from their stewardship of these lands and these waters. Also, we're grateful to Fieldstone Communities of Bainbridge Island, which sponsors Something to Talk About. Fieldstone offers assisted, independent living and memory care on a tranquil Rolling Bay campus right around the corner from Bay Hay and Feed. They have day stay and respite care programs, and right now they're offering free lunch if you give them a call, and you can go take a look and enjoy the bar and grill. 206-594-1010 is the number to call, or go to their website, fieldstonecommunities.com. Greg, I want to thank you very much for making yourself available to talk to us today about fixing our ferries. And if we get time, I'm sure we can talk about some of the other things that happened at the end of the legislative session. You are the vice chair of Washington Legislature Maritime Conference, right?
That's right.
And as part of that, and also, I mean, it's probably it's hard to say the quid pro quo of this or which way it went, but you got involved and had a number of town halls on the theme of fixing our ferries. So I'll just let you get started and say, sort of after a very busy year of working this issue, where are we on the prospect? I do know that you wrote a letter not long ago, public letter, to the new ferries chief. I don't know. Let me see if I can find what his actual title is. The assistant secretary to the Washington State Ferries. And you've talked to a lot of us citizens, we citizens. So tell us what's going on. Thank you.
Absolutely, Reed. And thank you. I so appreciate this opportunity and I appreciate your partnership. The town hall we had on Bainbridge Island at the Bainbridge Island Senior Community Center, I think that was a turning point in all of this. We were able to sponsor legislation for my office that had 27 co-sponsors from including leadership from both parties, the most liberal members of the House of Representatives and the most conservative coming together to actually co-sponsor a bill to help fix our ferries. That doesn't typically happen in Olympia. It's a big deal. When all was said and done, as we got to the end of our legislative session, $80 million new dollars in ferry funding, with a big focus on both maintenance and preservation. We've got to take better care of the vessels we do have. We also need to front load investments to take care and expand our team. We have 1,800 hardworking crew at WSF. Almost half of that 1,800 will be eligible for retirement in the coming years. That is an enormous challenge. It's also an opportunity. And so $10 million of that new funding is dedicated to creating more redundancies and just bigger pipelines. So we bring more folks on board, because if you zoom into the data, 3,500 canceled sailings in 2023. And every canceled sailing, that's folks missing work, missing school, missing doctor's appointments. It's our small businesses missing out on tourism dollars. It's a big deal. 3,500. And that's not just Bainbridge, Seattle. It's actually all 10 routes across Puget Sound. And that was the big success we had this session, Reed. We were able to make this way more than just a Bainbridge or more than just a Kitsap issue. It's a state issue. It's our economy. It's our connection. It's our togetherness. And it's fundamentally an equity issue. We all need access to job opportunities, to medical facilities and healthcare. And we've done a good job telling that story, thanks to folks like you as community leaders stepping up and speaking with one voice. So I'm heartened at the progress we've made in a short period. I've already looked at the data from the first quarter of 2024. And our rate of cancellation has been cut in half. And so we're still not at the gold standard we're aiming for, but things are absolutely trending in the right direction. And a big part of that, we have the right strategy, we're resourcing it, and then we've got the right leadership. On Monday morning, I was with Steve Nevy, our new head of Washington State Ferries. He is a career mariner who really understands the complexities of operating a fleet and incentivizing and motivating a maritime workforce. It's high time we have a maritime leader leading America's largest maritime fleet. And we now have that in Steve Nevy. And so I am bullish, I'm optimistic. And a big reason why is because our community has stood up and spoken with one voice. And it's really an honor to be your representative in Olympia, helping to channel that into more resources so we can fix our ferries.
The Seattle Times had an article today or yesterday about here we are. More than 350,000 folks are expected to be using the ferry system over the next couple days during the Memorial Day holiday weekend. And they were saying that, quoting the ferry system now, that in the first 4 months of this year, they completed 99.1% of their scheduled sailings, which, as you say, is an improvement over, say, the year previous. One of the things that is of interest to me, I lived in Eastern Washington for many years, and I remember that there wasn't a lot of support from that part of the state for what were, seen as highway dollars being spent on the ferry system. It sounds like maybe the situation has changed somewhat, or there's a statewide economic value to this that you're able to tell.
Yeah, there is statewide economic value, and that's been a big focus of mine. When I was first joined on the House of Representatives, I had the opportunity to actually travel to Washington, D.C., and share with the Biden administration more about challenges that we see in our neck of the woods. And ferries, ferries, ferries was my message. And a big emphasis of those meetings, I learned just how important it is that we have the data, we have the documentation, and we have the designs. And with those three things, we're going to be much more competitive for federal help and federal dollars. So that has been an emphasis here, Reed. Although the biggest deal has actually just been connecting. So when I joined on the House, I made a point, I'm going to have a coffee or a burger with every colleague that I can. And one of these I'll tell you about briefly was a sit down with Representative Tom Dent, who's a bison farmer and a rancher from the eastern side of the state. He's not a big ferry rider. He's ridden it once in his life. And so that's not the core issue for him and his neighbors. The core issue is beef. How can we better support beef farmers that are basically getting bought out by big corporate farms? How can we make beef profitable again for a family farmer? And Representative Dent's idea is to have a beef commission. And I made it a big goal of, hey, I would love to help you get that beef commission if you can help me get ferry funding. Because it's important for your way of life to have beef farmer supported, and it's really important for our way of life to have ferry supported. By the end of session, Representative Tom Dent, who's on transportation with me, he had put the word out. He had talking to a bunch of colleagues. And by the end of session, almost every Democrat votes for that beef commission. And then every Republican votes for ferry funding. And so it's an example of, I think that's how government really should work and how our representatives really should figure out some common ground to get stuff done, because that's going to be really important for beef farmers in Eastern Washington. And I'll tell you, $80 million is a big deal for us to get the ferries back on track.
So one of the things that Steve Nevy mentioned in his column that was in the Seattle Times was that for the first time in 50 years, we're allowed to issue a national request for bids for shipbuilders, and that we can build two ferries at once. How significant do you see that as part of the solution to our challenge of not having enough operable ferries?
It's a big deal, Reed. Yeah, for 50 years, not only have we restricted where our Washington State ferry vessels can be built, we have also chronically underinvested as a nation in shipbuilding capacity, in our maritime facilities and infrastructure, and then our maritime workforce. And the challenges we're seeing today with WSF, they're actually challenges that we see across the country with shipbuilding, across the country with maritime workforce. So actually, this isn't specific to Puget Sound. It's not specific to Washington State Ferries. It's a nationwide issue. And that's why myself and my team, we're calling for better federal policy that's more responsive to jumpstart shipbuilding capacity. Because right now in Puget Sound, Washington State Ferries is a comparatively small player in this because you have the U.S. Navy, you have merchant marine, you have luxury yachts. I mean, all of these big ship projects are competing for the same few ship slots. And the result is we're not able to build that in state at a competitive, anywhere near competitive rates. And so luckily, shipbuilders in Virginia, in Louisiana, and California will bid. And I think that is going to be a good thing for us ultimately. At the same token, I want to do everything we can to support shipbuilders and our maritime workforce right here in Puget Sound. And luckily, we've got a lot of work and a lot of wood to chop right here. So I think we can do both, and we should do both.
The other thing that I know you talked about at your town hall was how a lot of the counties, Kitsap County in particular, have stepped up to help with foot ferries.
Mhm.
Is that something that you see continuing as for the next few years? Is that something that the state can help with?
Yes. So we are the first boats won't come off the dock until 2028, maybe even 2029. And there's a lot of pain across our ferry network until those new boats are ready. And so we need to be creative. We need to think outside the box in the years ahead. Kitsap Transit has heroically stepped up, launched a foot ferry service for neighbors in Kingston and Bremerton to be able to get directly to downtown Seattle so they can get to work, get to school, get to their doctor's appointments. That's a big deal. The challenge is that also means a tax hike for everyone in Kitsap to help pay for that. That's not fair. When the state is the one dropping the ball, the state needs to step up. And that's been my message alongside Senator Drew Hansen. We were able to secure $4 million from the state budget, which will cover the vast majority of the cost of operating that fast ferry. And so that is a good start in 2024. We need to keep that going because again, we're probably 4, maybe 5 years off, and that shouldn't mean a tax hike for all of us in Kitsap to pick up the ball when the state has dropped it. So foot ferries is a great idea, and I would love to see additional funding where we can have Sunday service for Kitsap Transit, and we can better integrate public transit and bus services with our ferries, and we can better integrate trails and sidewalks and protected bike lanes with our ferries. So that way we have a much more sustainable and ecologically sensitive and just a healthier, safer way for us to connect communities together. And ferries is a beautiful connecting, not only shore to shore, but door to door as well.
So are there other things that I'm sure you've heard a lot of ideas about things that people think might work, like reviving some sort of mosquito fleet. Maybe that's partly what we're just talking about there a little bit.
Yeah, so I love the history of our region. I mean, it's just such a special place, and we're one of these spots where it's much more efficient to actually take little boats around to get around than it is to drive 30 or 40 miles, right? And if you go to Crystal Springs, you'll see all these old docks that used to connect us to Bremerton, or where I grew up, Manzanita Bay, that connects you to Brownsville and to Keyport and to Poulsbo. And there's little evidence of that all around the island and all around Kitsap. We can honor our heritage and the beautiful history here while doing the right thing for planet Earth. I think that's a cool opportunity. So we have about $400,000 in the state budget to do feasibility studies about Silverdale and Bremerton. And then I'd like to expand that to Eagle Harbor, to Suquamish, to Liberty Bay and Poulsbo to really think, how can we use more passenger only ferries? And maybe it's a weekend deal to help tourists get around. Maybe it's a 7-day week thing to help our workforce get around, or a summer deal to help folks get to small businesses around the peninsula. But we're greenlighting the funds to fast track this work. And then I would love to use both state and federal dollars to help rebuild some of that mosquito fleet. And Kitsap Transit has been a real visionary, and they've been delivering. Would love to accelerate that development so that we get more folks around the county and get folks out of cars, and doing, again, the right thing for Puget Sound is also the right thing for our small businesses. It's the right thing for our economy.
So you mentioned the right thing for the environment. One of the things that's been floated is, so to speak, is the idea of fast tracking either through leasing or some other way, diesel powered ferries that the hybrid technology is not right, or it's not ready. It's going to take time. It's going to be difficult. It's going to have breakdowns. And I know that while the governor is dead set against the idea of anything but hybrid electric. Some of the gubernatorial candidates, including Rob Ferguson, I think, have been open to the idea of some sort of diesel for a while or something like that. Where do you stand on all that?
Yeah, so all of the stuff, as you, I got a big briefing book when I first joined the House of Representatives, and as you dig in to the data, to the numbers, to the budgets, you start realizing, man, this is a game of trade-offs where it is really complex, and the closer you get to the problem, the more you realize, wow, like the only simple problems were solved long ago. This is a thicket. It's a Gordian knot that we're working through, and it's challenging. Innovating and trying to do, state of the art is challenging. It takes time. I know in the long run, we are all going to be glad that we're making an investment for hybrid electric vessels. It's the right thing for Puget Sound. It'll save us on fuel costs. It'll reliably get folks across the sound for generations ahead. Getting to that point is tricky. It's challenging. We're feeling the pain today because we're not able to reliably operate the fleet the way we'd like. We need 26 vessels to fully operate the fleet. We only have 15 operational as of this morning. That's not good enough. We need to move fast, and everyone feels that. I've spoken to the governor multiple times on this. Governor Inslee feels that he's doing everything he can. His team works around the clock. WSF crew works around the clock, and really the legislature, we need to allocate the resources with the right strategy to help make it happen. So specifically, Reed, we need every potential solution on deck right here. So I am a fan of let's lease boats wherever we can. Let's equip our regional transit authorities like Kitsap Transit to help fill the gaps. Let's greenlight as much funding as we can to cover the gap for maintenance and preservation. We're $250 million behind on maintenance and preservation. And that's a lot of the reason why we have breakdowns where an engine rod goes down or a propeller. We got to get back ahead. And so that will, it's not a fancy thing for a politician to argue that we chip rust off hulls, but ultimately that's how you keep vessels in operation longer. So I applaud governors' candidates bringing good ideas to the ferry fleet. Never in my lifetime has ferries been one of the three top issues in a governor's race. It is now. And part of that is our community has stepped up and made it known we need reliable ferries. Fix our ferries. That's a big deal. I think Bob Ferguson has a lot of great ideas on this to listen to ferry riders, to fast track ferry build. And I think it's a reasonable idea to say we need new boats online as quickly as possible. I also don't want to disrupt all of the good planning and preparation and all the bids that are now going out to market to bring on hybrid electric. So I think we can do this. We need to bring our best ideas to the table, and we need to greenlight it with the right resources to make it happen.
Thank you very much. I want to make sure that if somebody is here that has a question that they'd like to pose or comment to Greg, you have a chance to do that. Tom Kilbane.
Yes, probably maybe 12, 14 years ago, there was a group that was working on trying to retain the old property where the ferry maintenance yard is.
Hmm.
The two people that were kind of spearheading it, Rachel and I think it was Bob Smith.
Hmm.
They both passed away, but we found when we tried to get in to talk to the ferry maintenance people, we found that to be a nightmare. They wouldn't let you in. You had to make an appointment. And I would suggest you talk to Christine Rolfes. She was the one that was that had your position then. She did a lot of work, met with us, but in the end, the state bought the right not to give the property to the city. It was I was not at all happy with the way that went.
Yeah.
I owned a business, so I'm familiar with the problem. And in fact, on the diesel situation, this came up when I was on a school board. They wanted to.
Well, you have a calendar.
What? Anyway,
Sorry, I muted somebody. Go ahead.
anyway, they they wanted to get diesel, and I said, well, what do you have? All the buses are gas.
Mm.
They said, yeah, and I said, well, if you get diesel, you're gonna have to put in all of the storage tanks and everything, so
Mm.
I'm not sure that's a real good idea. But that would be the same issue with the ferries. But I would check, look into the background on some of this, and Christine would be someone that you maybe have already spent time with her, but
Mm.
she knows a lot about it.
Tom, thank you, and appreciate your years and years and years of service to our community. Sincerely, thank you. You're right on. We got to learn from each other. Now, Commissioner Rolfus has been a great role model and mentor for me, getting me up to speed. She actually testified in Olympia for our ferry bill and helped us build a lot of traction. So she's been a great partner on all of this now with the county. We've needed counties to step up and speak with one voice. She's been super helpful there. Um, the Eagle Harbor Maintenance Facility is one that, I've lived on the island. I moved here when I was 3 months old, spent my life here, and yet I actually didn't know the first thing about what actually happened at the maintenance facility. I was there on Monday morning for WSF Career Day, connecting with high school students that are considering a career in maritime. And it was inspiring getting to see the different shops, learn about how the different repair happens. And it's an example where we're really kind of integrating really complex fleet operations and all this important maintenance right there in the heart of Eagle Harbor. And so I share your concern. We want to do this in an ecologically sensitive way. We don't want to be poisoning Puget Sound right there. That's one of the questions I had for some of the shop foremen is, how do we make sure that we're not, instantly polluting Puget Sound right here? There's lots of protocols, there's lots of best practices that the team is using, and the advantage of Bainbridge Island with Eagle Harbor, it's the best natural harbor in the Salish Sea. It's fantastic, and the result of that is you can fit 4 boats. There are 4 right there, or there was as of Monday morning, and we're able to work to repair them. Here on the Caleton, here's what we're doing. Here on the South, here's what we're doing, and the result is we're able to much more quickly get these up to speed than if we were having to tow it down to California or tow it down to the Gulf Coast and then back. That would add months to each of these jobs. And so it was really an eye opener. And if folks are interested in touring, I would love to set something up. I've got several friends down there that love to share what they do. And they, of course, they are busy, literally working on the clock right now to get vessels back into fleet. But we need to do a better job, Tom, of sharing what happens there and why it's so important. Because otherwise, it's just, hey, what is this? Why don't we turn this into a park or something else? It is really important for our fleet.
The other thing that you mentioned in one of your, I guess it was a letter that you wrote, an open editorial in the papers, was about that rebuilding public trust. Do
Yes.
you feel as though you've seen some movement there from the state ferries in the time that you've been working on this?
Yeah. So, in the letter you're referencing there in the Seattle Times, I make a I make a big point of like, it can be simple things. Like this doesn't have to be super complex. It doesn't have to cost any money at all. It's as simple as like providing QR codes in the galley where people can give feedback. It's having a team member walk around asking people for their ideas to improve the ferry. It's letting folks know well ahead of time when there will be delays or construction. And then it's making senior leadership more visible to everyday writers that have had big questions about a lot of the stuff that we're now talking about. Um, those are simple things that, again, don't cost anything. And yet I think they can go a long way. And we're fortunate. We have a leader now in Steve Nevy who he gets that. Every Friday, he actually pins a letter to the entire WSF crew, and those letters get shared out to folks like me. He understands what it takes to really rebuild a culture to help folks get a pep back in the step. And I think we'll be seeing a lot more of them in ferry served communities because we need to do a better job sharing the game plan, fielding questions, taking comments, getting suggestions that can be really smart and thoughtful from ferry riders. And lo and behold, people understand, look, this has been a tough few years for us. And when we tell the truth and we level with ferry riders, they're willing to cut us some slack that, hey, the solution takes some time. It's complicated, but at least the strategy sounds right. Folks are listening. They're taking the complaints and suggestions and trying to do better because of it. So that's been the mentality. We're absolutely on an upward trajectory right here, and we're working hard. Every day I wake up thinking about how can I push this forward, and oftentimes laying in bed at night I'm thinking about what can I do tomorrow to get this moving forward. So this I'm a lifelong ferry rider. This is how my dad got into the city to help pay the bills for us. He sent 3 kids to college using the ferries. And that's the story of millions of households. And so it's a personal mission. We're working hard. We're going to get this done.
Yeah, you talk about suggestions. I know that some of the things that I've heard from folks at the Senior Community Center is it would be great if there were more places to stop on that long walkway now that goes from both directions if you are not an able-bodied person. Another thing that somebody suggested to me was it would be great if since we know from the ferry vessel watch sort of when the next expected arrival is. If somehow that kind of expectation of what we think is the best guess of when the next ferry is actually going to leave, rather than when it's scheduled, could be the kind of thing that would show up on the apps that we're reliably using, that the DOT is providing. Any other suggestions like that that have caught your ear?
Yeah, great idea. And we now have we can use predictive software. We have a very good idea of when the next boat will leave. Let's share that on the app. And then if you go to an airport or a train station anywhere in the world, you look up and you can see the next departures and the arrivals. It's high time that we have that level of signage. That is something that costs money, right? And I will be the first one to sponsor that budget proviso so that we have the funding to do that. Not everyone has a cell or has the app or has a phone handy, but really it's just a nice deal to know when the next boat's coming. So that's a great idea. I've heard from working moms that after you drop the kids off at school, you're hustling to the boat, you jump on, and then a few of these older boats that we're now using don't have adequate mirror space. And that's a small thing, but if you're a working mom trying to get your makeup right before a big meeting, it can be frustrating if you don't have a mirror handy, right? So it's a lot of that low-hanging fruit. It's the mirrors, it's the coat racks, it's ensuring the galley is staffed and has good warm food and there's a coffee bar. Those are little things that we can do now. And those that cost money, the legislature stands ready to step up and invest in the ferry fleet. This is a big deal for our community. We need to invest as if it's a big deal like it is.
Okay, are there any other questions or comments that anybody would like to make about? Yes.
Yes. Hi. Hello, Greg. Thank you, Reed. And thank you very much, Greg, for your presentation and bringing us up to date. I've been riding the ferries since I moved to Seattle and then to Bainbridge. So that's 48 years and I love the ferries. My name is Janice Silva.
Janice.
I have an important question for you. I have to drive on. I cannot walk on. I still don't think it's safe in Seattle. I'm physically challenged. So I don't have the option of walking on. And as you probably are aware, the senior drivers round trip fare now from Bainbridge to Seattle and then back went up on May 1st. It increased by 25%. Can you answer why it went up so high? And are we supposed to be expecting these excessive increases every 6 months going forward?
Janice, thank you. Number one, thank you for supporting ferries for 48 years. That's remarkable.
You're welcome.
No, seriously, that's amazing. Been by Mimi. I was in 3rd grade with Mimi. She's a beloved friend. Janice, you're right. We always have to balance. It's a balancing act. So there is a special commission that actually sets ferry fares. And really the balancing act is revenues are down and they're down big because ridership is down, particularly, on our Bremerton to Seattle route, most of all. And so it's a tough one. We're trying to make the numbers add up. We're trying to get as much fare box recovery as we can, though only the Bainbridge, Seattle, and then Kingston, Edmonds reliably meet fare box. The other 8 routes actually lose money, and they lose a lot of money in off-peak seasons. So when you're looking at it from a budgetary perspective, it's tough because we do want to make these big investments in the ferry service to get back to reliability. And if we're way, way short of projected revenue, we then have less resources to work with. A note that I've made to our transportation chair and to colleagues is, look, when we raise fares, for some people, it's not a big deal. They have a nice 401k and they've got, tons of retirement savings. There are a lot of us on fixed incomes. There are a lot of us that are really trying to scrape by, trying to make ends meet, trying to support our families. We need to be conscientious of that. And I don't take rate hikes lightly. It is pain for our neighbors. We need to be sensitive to that as legislators and folks on the commission. That's my message, is like, there is a balancing act. We need to be sensitive that it really impacts our neighbors, and it's an equity issue. We want to have accessible public transit. The ferry is the crown jewel of public transit here in Washington State, and it should be accessible for everybody. And so I think there are ways we can think outside the box a little bit here. I would love to offer those that like really need discounted fare to have an option for that, because if you got to drive on and you're getting hit with a 25% rate hike and you're on a limited budget and you're closely watching finances, that is really, really, really rough. And I salute you, Janice, for being a longtime writer and patron for the ferry. And we got to do right by everybody, including those, our seniors that have worked hard all their life and are now a lot of times on fixed income. So thank you for flagging that, Janice.
Do you
Okay.
know if that what the cadence is for that review of the rates and how far out they work?
Yeah, not specifically in this case. I would be, I think we won't even get into dialogue in until 2025 at the earliest. And my message is, hey, slow down here. Like we just raised it 25%. That's a lot for folks. Like, give us a moment. We are trying to keep up with inflation on a lot of salaries and fuel and just operating expenses. So it's tough. And when you get into the cycle of inflation, it gets worse for everybody. And that's been a little bit of the economic climate since COVID. And, I wish we had a wand to stop, to zero it out. We don't. And so you got to make some trade-offs, but we need to be listening to real ferry riders about the real pain that a 25% hike does create for folks.
And it may be that the ridership picks up. We, of course, have been through a real slump because of COVID.
Yes.
Not only did it hit the ferry workers, but it also shut down lots of businesses in Seattle. So commuters stopped commuting.
Amen. Yep.
I know that you wanted to talk about a couple other things, so I'm going to give one more shout out if somebody wants to raise a ferry. Yes, Tom.
I have one more comment. Again, years ago when we were interested in this, I've asked a question to whoever was in charge, that he came over to speak, and I said, they bought a new boat and you still had that cavitating when you make the turn. And I said, when you buy a new boat, can't you go back to the company? Don't you get a guarantee? Number one, he didn't know what cavitating was. And no, he had no idea whether they were given a guarantee by the company when they bought the boat. My suggestion is to get somebody, whoever that committee is that makes the decision to purchase it, make sure all that stuff is covered in the contract, because that shouldn't. I noticed that first time I rode the ferry 22 years ago. That shouldn't happen. And it just kept on happening.
Yeah.
Anyway, I would also like to thank you. I appreciate what you're doing. But I would look and find out as much as I could about how much of this has been done before.
Tom has been helping with the negotiations around getting ready to build an expanded senior center, and he's given me a lot of advice on
I got a lot of points too, buddy.
I love it. And Tom, we need smart, thoughtful folks at the table helping us think through it. We made a couple decisions we would take back, I'm sure, if we could, on recent contractual deals. And that's a mistake that you learn the hard way, and then it handcuffs you. So we've got to do it better. I will say we've built a really strong team that's helping us on the procurement side. And part of that is getting the contract right, getting risk mitigation right, getting, guarantees designed in, and then the financial incentives really aligned so that folks are working quickly, folks are designing to a high standard, and then we're engineering this the right way. And so, yeah, you make a good point. We've got to be attuned because it's extremely costly to goof that up upstream.
We live with those mistakes for a long, long, long time.
Reed, I have one more question.
Yes, Janice.
Okay, Greg, and thank you for being so receptive to Tom and my questions and Reed's. I appreciate that very much. I only for the most part, take the Bainbridge to Seattle ferry. But there are other people who take the Bremerton. And I understand there's still only one ferry on the Bremerton run. Is that correct?
Since 2021, that is correct.
Okay, so my question is,
Can I ask you a question? Do you,
have the Ferries Commission and everyone related to keeping it organized so that we have enough boats to run, tried to look for substitutes, even for ferries that may have been just sort of put out of use in other countries so that Bremerton can be served better? They're waiting long times to take the ferry. And it seems to me, shouldn't there be a provision for substitute ferries till we get the next 9 and get back up to where we need to be?
Hey, great question, Janice. And yeah, we need to do better. And, on Bainbridge, we have challenges with ferry reliability for sure. The challenges are even bigger for neighbors in Kingston, neighbors in Bremerton, neighbors in San Juans. These are big challenges, and you're right on. We've got to think outside the box. What has worked for the first 73 years of WSF doesn't necessarily work for this moment right now. We need to be thoughtful outside the box. And I think the thing that one of the surprises I've had getting really close to the challenge is that we have a nationwide and really worldwide deficit of reliable ships and reliable maritime crew. And so it's really hard because we're competing with, 37 states have ferry networks. WSF is the biggest. Boom, we're the biggest. But the Bay Area, Staten Island, the Florida Gulf Coast, the Cumberland River in Kentucky, the Great Lakes, Arizona, New Mexico, there's a native reservation with a ferry between the two. Each of these places, we actually don't have enough boats. And so you're right on. We need substitute vessels coming in. It's challenging. It's extremely expensive, and it's extremely scarce. And so that's a place where I think regional transit authorities like Kitsap Transit are actually, they're really well equipped because they can use smaller kind of jet catamaran style vessels. It's foot ferry, so it's not for everybody. I know if you got to drive on, it doesn't quite make the solution, but a lot of neighbors are willing to say, hey, look, I'll bike on, I'll walk on now because I need to get to Seattle. And we got to think outside the box. And yeah, I encourage, bring your ideas. I'd love to relay them up the chain here so that we can continue making it happen and deliver for our neighbors.
So I'll just note that in his, Steve Nevy, the new chief of the ferries, in his letter, which came out about the same time as Greg's, he wrote in the Seattle Times that we have looked, that we searched globally for boats to supplement our fleet. Unfortunately, there were none that were the right fit. And so they went to what we were talking about earlier, fast ferry options that Greg has talked about, with support from the Kitsap Transit and the Vashon Water Taxi, which I think is King County. And that gets to another point you were talking about, Greg, the idea of if there are fast ferries, you need to have public transit to make it easy for you to get to those fast ferries because you're going to walk the whole way. You're going to leave your car at home. Yep. One of the things you wanted to talk about was the improvements to transit funding, land transit funding in the last legislative session.
Yeah. Thank you, Reed. And yeah, I'll preview this quickly. And if y'all are all going to sleep, I'll know to cut off. So we need to think really strategically about this. And I think this moment with the hardship we're feeling is a moment to really, let's use this to reflect on the future we want to build. And part of that is, imagine we built park and rides around Kitsap that have really reliable bus service that you're able to park kind of near your neighborhood. Think on Bainbridge up off Day Road and 305. We have a nice park and ride there. You can park there. There's a Kitsap transit bus that picks you up 22 minutes before the ferry departs. You get dropped off 11 minutes before that ferry departs. And you have time to grab something from Commuter Comforts, queue up in line, grab your paper. We want to make that relaxed, stress-free, environmentally conscious. And then you're able to keep your car close to home as opposed to having to drive all the way into Winslow, find a parking spot, pay a bunch of money for it, pollute the earth while driving that extra, 6 miles and then 6 miles back. And then of course we reduce congestion on 305 and everyone else is able to move faster as a result of that. So there's some win-win-wins here baked in. I mentioned getting the fast ferry funding for Kitsap Transit. That unlocks more budgetary bandwidth for Kitsap Transit to do things like restore Sunday service, which is a really big deal for folks that want to go grocery shopping, that need to get to work, that want to get to church, want to go hang out with their friends. Not everyone is able to drive. We've built a society where if you are unable to drive or can't afford to drive, it's a really, really tough deal. And so we need to, I think we need to push back on that. We need to secure more transportation dollars that are building a more equitable public transit system and a much more equitable, share the road and share the trail style system. And, I'm really honored to be on the House Transportation Committee and to fight for these priorities every day. One project I was just looking at Monday afternoon is Safe Routes to School, which is a dedicated grant fund to help create protected bike lanes and sidewalks to help kids get to school safely. And of course, it then connects community closer together. Tom, you mentioned Commissioner Christine Rolfes. She has been a champion for trail connectivity. And this project at View Ridge Elementary down in East Bremerton now will connect kids safely to not only to West Bremerton and the Warren Avenue Bridge, which has a $27 million new dollars of funding. It'll now connect these kids to the Illahee Preserve, one of the most beautiful places in Kitsap County. And in the future, we'd like to put in a node that connects folks from Illahee all the way up to the Sound to Olympics Trail. And so I think when we zoom out a little bit and we think about the kind of community we want for our grandkids, these are investments we can make today that are, do the right thing for the planet. They're great for small business. They're great for community building, and just brings us closer together so that we're really acting as one.
Thanks. Sheila, did you have a comment or a question? I saw you raised your hand earlier.
And I do. Greg, thank you so much. Your knowledge is just, I was there for your town meeting too. I'm in awe of your ability to have all of this information and just be able to so easily share that with us and understandably. So thank you. You're an amazing person. I do have a question. I just wondered federally, do we end up with any help from Pete Buttigieg at all?
Sheila, appreciate the question, and I love your Mariners polo and earrings. Those are fantastic.
Well, I work there. That's why I'm all dressed.
Oh, fantastic!
Except we've got Billy Joel tonight. Sorry, it's a tough job, but somebody's got to do it.
I love it, Sheila. Good thinking. I love it.
And she'll be taking the ferry to get there.
Yeah, I will be getting a ferry to get there. You betcha I am.
Heck yeah. So Mayor Pete, now Secretary Pete, he actually came out and he wrote, I believe, the Clinton-Mukilteo route, looked at our terminals, and came away from it realizing, wow, this is really important for our economy here around Puget Sound Basin. It's really important for our environmental future, our economic future. We have an ally there in Secretary Pete. We've got allies in the Biden administration. And now we need to play ball locally here. So yeah, part of what we've got to do is lay out the case to our representatives. I was with Congressman Kilmer's district director yesterday, having this very same conversation. On Monday, I was on the phone with the congressman, having this very same conversation. Part of what we need to do, Sheila, is it can't just be, hey, help out Washington State ferries. It's got to be help out our ferry systems across the country. I mentioned we've got 37 states with ferries. Guess what? We have 0 federal ferry caucus of any kind. And so tens of billions of dollars are allocated for federal highways. Think of our interstates every year, and yet only $250-ish million makes it into our ferries. And to put that in context, that's less than one new ferry boat across 37 states. It's negligible. We need to be doing much, much, much more than we're doing right now. And I will say our team at WSF, they're pretty good. Out of that 250 million, roughly $71 million of that is going to WSF. So, hey, nice job. Like you're collecting a bunch of that, but we need to make the pie a lot bigger. We're fighting over a tiny piece of pie right now. And, Congressman Kilmer has been an advocate. Congressman Rick Larson, who represents Everett and the naval station over there, has been a big advocate. And then we've got two very powerful senators. Senator Cantwell is helps head up transportation for the Senate, and then Senator Murray is as high as you can get on the budget side. So we have really powerful federal representatives. I think we need to keep beating on the drum, saying, please help us organize around ferries, because it's a big deal for us here around Puget Sound, and it's a really big deal for communities across the country. And it's a surprise to me that we haven't organized that already. I am going to be doing everything I can to bang that drum and get folks together. We are working with the Puget Sound Regional Council, which is a group of government leaders across Greater Puget Sound. The president of PSRC is actually the mayor of Poulsbo, Mayor Becky Erickson. And she is a dynamo. She understands this. She's already gotten a letter to federal representatives with like 30 plus signatures on it. And so we're working at this. We got to go faster, because I really want to hit the ground running in 2025. When the new Congress is seated, I want this to be a real priority federally. It's going to be a big priority statewide. We need federal help as well. So Sheila, I'm glad you're thinking about Mayor Pete, Secretary Pete, as am I, and we've got to move while we can.
Yeah, one of the things that you said in those town halls was the idea that data is going to make a big difference in that. And you were able to secure some money for collecting data about our system. Do you feel as though it's possible that other jurisdictions, other parts of the country with ferry systems could participate in that to make a unified effort? Or I know you're a state representative. I don't need to ask you too much about how it's going to work across the country, but it sounds like you're thinking about how all these pieces have to come together.
Yeah, so great question. What I've realized from our research is that when you look up like the Cumberland River Network, which again, totally different. It's Kentucky and Kentucky versus Puget Sound. We have a lot of the same issues. And so the hope is to actually figure out who's really leading the charge across these 37 other states, and then get together. And because I think when we speak with one strong voice in Puget Sound, we're able to get big stuff done for Washington State ferries. When we begin speaking with one voice about stronger public-private partnerships for American shipyards and a Jones Act 2.0 to support apprenticeships and pipelines to get more high schoolers and young people into the maritime service, all of a sudden a rising tide lifts all boats, pun intended. And that's where we're at, Reed, where I think we've got to make a more concerted effort. And so I'm a state representative, but ultimately this is my top priority. We've got to get our ferries back on track, and you got to think outside the box. Typically a state representative isn't working with somebody from Kentucky, but maybe that's what we need right now to get the attention of Congress.
Okay, I want to thank you very much for taking the time. Anything else you want to add before we cut it off? I really appreciate you taking all our questions.
100%, Reed. I want to close with a thank you. The reason why we've made the level of progress we've made is because our community has stepped up, and hosting our town hall there at the Bainbridge Island Senior Community Center, that was a turning point. There was literally an NPR reporter that helped share the story that's being broadcast around the country now about how WSF needs the help. That's what happens when we stand up as a community, and I'm immensely appreciative of it. So thank you to each and every one of y'all as community leaders for being part of the solution here. Really, I'm honored to be your representative, and I'm honored to be working together to fix our ferries.